Okay, let's go through. Let's get a 2022 Dynasty Startup Draft going. We are recording this the last day of your redraft fantasy football season. I mean, hopefully we are able to bring home some Dynasty championships. Hopefully y'all had a good redraft season as well. Personally, I'm honestly tired of it. I'm honestly ready to get to the Dynasty offseason. Y'all know we started on YouTube back in 2018, exclusively Dynasty fantasy football every single day. And yes, we make redraft content now because that's what most people play, but Dynasty, my true passion. Cannot wait to make Dynasty videos every single day for probably the next 6 months. I mean, we're going to make a Dynasty video every single day at least until September, around there, but you know that I have a passion for this. And yeah, we already sent out the link on Patreon, and we already have everybody in this draft. That was extremely quickly. Thank y'all. Of course, everybody that supports the channel on Patreon gets into these mock drafts, gets in real Dynasty drafts with us. Let's not waste any time. Let's dive right in here. And please, if you have not done so already, make sure you go down, drop a like on the live stream, subscribe to the channel only if you play in Dynasty Fantasy Football. Let me make my first round selection. Then we'll go through and pull up the YouTube live chat to see who's out here. Hopefully we have our audio and everything set up correctly. If not, that's going to be very embarrassing. Okay, so it looks like we're getting Josh Allen at the 105. Interesting to say the least to see Justin Herbert go at the 102. And I know that these picks are probably going to seem a little bit rushed, but I want to get as many rounds as we can in here. That way, I mean, everybody is really comfortable later on in their Dynasty draft. So we're going to have a 30-second timer, but that's because I want to have this Dynasty startup a reasonable time. That way, those people on Patreon that are participating in this draft with us, they can still go back to their regular life. They can still go do what they need to do on this fine Monday afternoon. Let me switch this over just 1 second so I can pull up the YouTube chat. Apologize for that. And keep in mind, you know, every single Dynasty startup draft we're going to do is going to be a super flex league. I mean, all our redraft content, we just talk about one quarterback, because that's where the majority of the casual players are. I mean, that's where the majority of the people that are just getting into it for a little bit of funsies don't necessarily know what they're doing. But these are the diehards. These are the people who really know what's going on, the Dynasty Fantasy Football players. So, of course, we're going to be covering all Superflex all the time. I know some people are going to be frustrated with that, knowing that, I mean, yeah, a lot of people here play in one quarterback leagues. But the thing is, a Superflex startup draft, you can easily look at that and know exactly how your one quarterback draft would have gone by just manually moving those quarterbacks down the board. However, if you're looking at a one quarterback startup draft, to go through and then to switch that over to a Superflex, that's damn near impossible. Let me switch this over. Hopefully our audio is correct. Okay, we already have a ton of people in the chat. We also have a ton of likes in the live stream. Thank y'all so much for everybody who's gone down there and dropped a like on the stream already. Let me give some shout outs to the people coming out. We got Dom Koss, Hurricane Lane, Sam, Jason, TJ, NC Tricks, Baby Dragon, James, Braden, and Jesse. Thank you all so much for coming out. And Dad saying, interested to see where Amari St. Brown gets drafted now in the startup draft. Yeah, I think we actually ended up taking Amari St. Brown in the last Dynasty startup mock draft that we did. But, oh my God, this is going to be bad. 1 second. I think I have people here that I got to tell to F off. Okay, thank God we didn't miss any picks, and our guy coming back to us in the second round does not make it. Y'all know we were going Trey Lance in the second, but looks like that's not going to end up happening. Trippy Trout says, I'm assuming this is Superflex. Yeah, I mean, if it was a one quarterback startup, you would see no quarterbacks off the board by now. Austin Eckler at the 204. This is a horrendous pick. I mean, you can kind of tell that this person probably is new to Dynasty Fantasy Football. To go through and take Austin Eckler, running back that's going into year 3 of their second contract. I mean, at this point, to take that player over a wide receiver like CeeDee Lamb, a cornerstone asset, to take that player. I mean, I believe Deshaun Watson isn't off the board as well. Yeah, Deshaun Watson still available. I mean, at the running back position, to take Austin Eckler over Saquon Barkley. I mean, to take Austin Eckler over CeeDee Lamb, A.J. Brown. I just think that's very bad. Kyle Pitts I would rather have than Austin Eckler as well. There are so many players I would prefer over Eckler. I don't think you should be taking him for another 2 to 3 rounds. Tyreek Hill does go at the 205. We need to kind of figure out who we're going to be selecting here because, I mean, they're 30-second timers. They're 30-second timers. And a big thing is right now, because not many people have done Dynasty startups, you have, I mean, this ADP list as a very bad one. I know that said it was an auto pick. It was not an auto pick. Justin Fields was very far down the ADP. That's who he most likely had in his queue. Now, if we're going to be looking at the quarterback position, honestly, there'd be one player I'd be interested in, and that would be Deshaun Watson. Now, if we're not going to go Deshaun Watson, pivoting over to running back, I mean, the guy we'd probably look at would be J.K. Dobbins. I don't think we want to go that direction, however. Yeah, I think we have a clear pick here. It's either going to be Kyle Pitts or Deshaun Watson. I did not clarify that this is a tight end premium startup. If this were to be a tight end premium startup, I would go through and I would take Kyle Pitts here. But given the fact that it is looking like just a super flex, non-tight end premium league, instead I'm going to take Deshaun Watson. Yes, there's risk associated with the pick, but at the same time, the upside, I think, definitely is worth it, knowing that the NFL has every incentive on the planet to go through and to get Deshaun Watson back in playing. I think Deshaun Watson is more likely to be starting the NFL in 2 years than Justin Fields. I'm sorry, not Justin Fields, than Jalen Hurts. And if you're looking at the points per game output that you will get from Deshaun Watson, I mean, he is going to be up ahead of Justin Fields, Trey Lance, Joe Burrow, Dak Prescott. I mean, we've seen historically that Deshaun Watson, every single year that he starts, he is that top 3 to top 5 quarterback on a points per game basis. So to take him here at the 208, when he could be viewed as a cornerstone asset, if he does come back, I think that's going to be a very solid start. Okay. So let me get a poll out real quick. Okay, and really quick, also, if you have not dropped a like in the live stream, please fix your life. Also, make sure you go down there, subscribe to the channel. If you want to get in our next drafts, here, this is a mock draft. We are going to do a ton of mock drafts. Probably every single week we'll get a mock draft going this offseason. And we're also going to get some real Dynasty startup drafts going as well. We run 20 Dynasty leagues, but that's all over there on Patreon. If you want to join our Patreon community, if you want to join the flock, you can find that link in the description of this live stream. When you join, not only do you have access to our Dynasty rankings, but you also at the same time will get access to our yearly Dynasty rookie draft guide, which this past season was over 100 players just diving into the 2021, over 100 pages just diving into the 2021 class of rookies. I mean, it's a great resource. You also get into Dynasty leagues with us. There's so much going on over there. And now to look at this, we're probably going to make a selection that is not popular at all. Can we do it? It's so weird to see him fall this far. I think we may be taking Barkley. Barkley should get a massive contract this offseason. He was drafted in 2018. If we weren't to take Barkley, who would we be going with? We're going to take Barkley as our running back 1 here. I feel comfortable with the wide receiver depth that we are going to be able to get later on. With Saquon Barkley, is a little bit younger. Obviously, this is a running back that's dealt with injuries over the past 2 seasons. And at the same time, the end of the year in 2021, Saquon Barkley was horrendous. That was mainly centered around the fact that the New York Giants were the worst offense in the NFL outside of the Jacksonville Jaguars over the past 2 months this season with the injury to Daniel Jones and the change at offensive coordinator. I think that here with Barkley, you could make an argument to possibly have another running back like J.K. Dobbins or Antonio Gibson over him. And that'd be a fair argument to make. Now, given his age, I'm easily going to be taking Saquon Barkley over a 28-year-old running back named Derrick Henry. I'm going to be taking him over Nick Chubb, who's also a little bit older, despite them being in the same draft class. So if you want to make an argument for someone outside of Saquon Barkley, I think that argument were to be made for those running backs still on their rookie deals, including J.K. Dobbins and Antonio Gibson. Outside of that, if you were going to be making an argument, I guess you could go over to George Kittle at the tight end position, grab one of these cornerstone wide receivers, a guy like DK Metcalf, or maybe even T. Higgins. At this point, really have to reassess how high T. Higgins is going to be moving in our Dynasty rankings. We should update those Dynasty rankings again, either this week or next week over there on Patreon. Derek coming out says free Barkley and Evan Ingram. Yes, I agree with you. We got to free Saquon Barkley, but Saquon Barkley, I believe, is a free agent this offseason. Obviously, what's most likely going to happen is Saquon Barkley will go back to New York. Saquon Barkley will probably just sign a massive extension. Hopefully, if the team's more competitive next year, they give him a full workload and he's not splitting the backfield with Devontae Booker as he was at the end of the season, which obviously, threw a pretty big wrench in everything. Okay. Derek says, Barkley going anywhere else. That pick is a home run. I don't know if Barkley's going to get away from New York. Trust me, I would love to see it. I would love to see it. But historically speaking, I'd be surprised if they want to invest the second pick overall into him in 2018 just to let him walk after his rookie deal. And technically he is under contract this next season. I'd imagine he's not playing with his fifth-year option. Obviously, they picked up the fifth-year option. I'd imagine that instead, they're going to go through and assign him to an extension. If I was Saquon Barkley, I wouldn't play under the fifth-year option. I would definitely hold out. And that's what we've seen time and time again from pretty much every running back on their second deal, going into their second deal. Remember the 2017 class, Joe Mixon, Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook, all got their contract extensions before their fifth-year option. Actually, they didn't even have a fifth-year option. That was before their fourth year. They were drafted in the second and third rounds. Kevin says, where does Antonio Brown get taken? Antonio Brown, not going to be taken anytime soon. And then, okay, someone in the chat says A.J. Brown. Okay, thank God. For a second, I thought we took Saquon Barkley over A.J. Brown, which I was not going to be happy with, but we checked. No, A.J. Brown went at the 211. Okay, that makes that pick a lot better. Love the Travis Etienne selection. With Travis Etienne, y'all know this is a running back that historically I've been higher than consensus on. Not necessarily saying that Jacksonville's a great situation, but we've been comparing Travis Etienne to Deandre Swift, Alvin Kamara. Y'all know I love Deandre Swift this last offseason, despite him being in a horrendous offense, despite him not going to get every single touch out of the backfield, but it's because you're going to get every target out of the backfield and you're going to get the usage in the red zone, which is incredibly important for the running back position. That's giving you every single valuable touch out of the backfield, despite you not necessarily getting every touch. There's a big difference between the high value touches and just raw volume, and I definitely prefer to chase the running backs that are going to get those targets in a PPR format, as well as going to get the red zone work. And crap, we got sniped on our 3 guys here. 4 guys, I would have been fine with any of those players, to be honest. Now we're going to be scrambling a little bit. We made the mistake of taking a quarterback here in the 4th round previously. I think we're probably going to be avoiding that situation. A running back going to be fine to pass up here as well. Obviously, the Chris Godwin injury is not favorable to take him here. We're probably going to take Godwin, however. So I'm not even going to mention the other wide receivers we would take. I will get to that in just a second. Now, with Chris Godwin, if y'all have seen us going through and drafting those 2022 best ball drafts, I would be a little bit lower on Godwin in those drafts compared to I'd be in Dynasty, because the issue is with him tearing his ACL so late in the season, there is that outside chance that the injury lingers into the preseason this next year, and also the outside chance that Chris Godwin misses the first month or so. And if that's going to happen, which I'm not saying it is, I'm saying there's an outside chance, then I think Chris Godwin in a best ball format is going to be a lot less valuable than he would be in a league like this, where we're more so looking for that long-term upside and also looking at the points per game that we'll get during the fantasy football playoffs. Keep in mind, Chris Godwin, while yes, he was drafted in 2017, but coming out of Penn State, he actually declared for the NFL at 20 years old. He is still incredibly young. I like to compare him to another wide receiver available on the board in Calvin Ridley. Chris Godwin is actually younger than Calvin Ridley, despite Calvin Ridley being drafted in 2018 out of Alabama compared to Chris Godwin being drafted at 2017. Now here, Cam Akers going at the 411. This is something that I have to probably just take my L on. Y'all know that Cam Akers was going at the 2-3 turn previously in Dynasty startups when we just started them earlier a few weeks ago. And I was coming out and I was saying, while I love Cam Akers, while Cam Akers was my Dynasty running back 4 overall before the injury, I could not take Cam Akers there because the history of running backs with the torn Achilles is just brutal. Going back the past 20 years, but things have changed since I said that. And I think we've been proven wrong in a multitude of ways. Cam Akers comes back from the IR this season, which is very encouraging of what we may have in the future in 2022 in particular. And B, also, we got an example of Donta Foreman being able to make his way successfully back from that Achilles tear. So I think you can be a little bit more excited now than previously. Now, I was hoping that we were going to get Darren Waller making it back to us in the 5th round. I think we could consider TJ Hawkinson here. I mean, with Hawkinson, obviously he was an elite tight end prospect coming in. Not only was he an elite tight end prospect coming in, but through the first 3 years of his NFL career, I mean, he's been very impressive. And you'd imagine the situation gets slightly better this upcoming offseason. So now you got Clyde Edwards-Helaire at the 504. There are a couple players I'd be looking at with this selection, including Hawkinson, as we've already mentioned. Instead, I think we're going to probably just double tap the wide receiver position. Another player that we are going to be considering in the 4th round is someone that we just mentioned, drafted in 2018. I mean, he has been a wide receiver 1 on a points per game basis essentially since his breakout at the end of his rookie season. We are going to take Calvin Ridley here. I mean, with Calvin Ridley, yes, he's a little bit further down the ADP list, but like I said, I mean, we're willing to reach at this point, because if you're looking at ADP right now this offseason, it is horrendous. It is garbage. I promise you. And honestly, this ADP list is never that good. I mean, if you're going over to like a high stakes platform, if you're going over to a league, I mean, a site that doesn't have mock drafts and instead it's just high stakes draft after high stakes draft after high stakes draft, that ADP list is going to be pretty damn good. That ADP list is going to be better than most set of rankings. Whereas if you're looking at the sleeper ADP that you have here, where it's a lot of just mock drafts where people are auto drafting once you get past round 6, that ADP list is going to be very bad. I mean, will get better as the offseason progresses. Hopefully Sleeper does some stuff to address it. But yeah, with Calvin Ridley, I mean, he's not incredibly young, but as we discussed, drafted in 2018, and this is a wide receiver despite starting slow at the beginning of this season. I mean, if we're looking historically over the larger sample, Calvin Ridley's been a fantastic option. Circle the Wagons coming out says, thoughts on DJ Moore, ? Yeah, DJ Moore, obviously always going to get compared to Calvin Ridley being in that same draft class, being the wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 in that year. With DJ Moore, maybe I am being ignorant when I'm saying this, because as I think through this out loud, DJ Moore is actually younger than Calvin Ridley. If y'all don't know, Calvin Ridley, while yes, he was only at Alabama for 3 years, he actually stayed in high school forever. God knows why, but nonetheless, I mean, DJ Moore declared at an extremely young age for the NFL draft. So age is definitely on the side of DJ Moore. DJ Moore has also been hyper productive in some spurts his own NFL career. Maybe this is something I need to revisit a little bit more, because the reason I'm taking Calvin Ridley here is because we saw the failure of DJ Moore, I mean, through a larger sample this season. And with DJ Moore, I really think the situation in Carolina is not going to be good going forward. But how am I supposed to say that the situation in Atlanta is going to be much better? So I think that's a good call out. Let me look up something real quick. I think it's a really good call out. You know what I should do also? I should run over to Patreon to look at our Patreon Dynasty rankings. Okay, so really quick, if we're looking at the NFC, I mean, Atlanta's sitting at 7-9, the Panthers at 5-11. It's not necessarily going to be a great spot for either team to go through and address the quarterback position in the NFL draft this year. You don't have those level of prospects that you did in last year's draft class. And remember how this draft is so much better. You could see the mistakes that were clearly made in the first Dynasty startup draft that we did this offseason, where in the 4th round, I believe it was the 4th, maybe it was the 5th, I'm unsure, but we ended up taking Mac Jones, which with hindsight was laughable, especially in one of the beginning of those drafts with this ADP list being so messed up. You had Matthew Stafford ending up going at like the 6-7 turn. I think it was at least in the 6th round. It was that damn late. And I definitely agree with the sentiment that Matthew Stafford needs to be ahead of Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence at the 404, I'm going to be willing to say this is pretty damn good value on Trevor Lawrence. Now, y'all know with Lawrence, we came out at the beginning of the season. We said, hell, the limited sample we've had, we're selling low. We're just going to wash our hands. We're going to go buy a veteran quarterback where we know what to expect, knowing that age doesn't matter at the quarterback position. We were saying to trade Trevor Lawrence for Matthew Stafford. I think here, this is probably the right price for Stafford, because if you're taking a step back, as we've already discussed, age simply does not matter at the quarterback position. And if you're looking at Stafford, he's going to be in a pretty damn good situation over the next 5-6 years. He's already shown us that he can be hyper productive compared to Trevor Lawrence. And I know everybody and their mom wants to come out and tell me, oh, Mason, it's Urban Meyer. It's Urban Meyer. It's not Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence is great. Urban Meyer sucked. Yeah, Urban Meyer sucked. I agree with you. Urban Meyer is 99% the reason to blame on the failures of Jacksonville this season. But to go through and to act like this situation is going to get fixed like that, how many good coaches are there in the NFL? Very, very few. Very few. Okay, now Mac Jones at the 606. Let's go through, see any names that stand out. We probably should have been doing this a couple rounds back. Like we discussed, this ADP list is so damn bad. I should also just have our Dynasty rankings pulled up. Michael Carter goes to the 607. Michael Carter was a player that we were considering with this selection. Now it does come down to, are we taking A.J. Dillon? If we want another running back here, we're going to take A.J. Dillon. If we were closer, actually, I don't want to be drafting that way. This isn't a best ball draft. We don't need to draft for team need. We just need to take value. Who would I prefer in Dynasty, A.J. Dillon or DeAndre Hopkins? A.J. Dillon going to year 3 of his rookie deal. You still have Aaron Jones with guaranteed money. We're going to take Hopkins at the 608. I know with Hopkins here, this looks like a very aggressive selection. And you know what? If I pull up my Dynasty rankings right now, I would imagine we have Michael Pittman right there with DeAndre Hopkins. Maybe Michael Pittman a little bit higher. This is one fault of live streaming and having a 30-second timer. I don't want to be making excuses. Let me run over to Patreon real quick, pull up my updated Dynasty rankings, and see where we have Hopkins versus Michael Pittman. I know 9 out of 10 people here are not going to agree with the DeAndre Hopkins selection. I know we had people on Patreon telling me that DeAndre Hopkins, oh, Mike Evans still available. Oh, yeah, that was a horrendous pick. Oh, my God. That was so damn bad. Actually, no, we have DeAndre Hopkins and Michael Pittman literally back-to-back, as well as Hollywood Brown. Yeah, Deontay Johnson already off the board. That's right in line with my Dynasty rankings. I mean, with DeAndre Hopkins, this is a player that I know that if we would not have selected him here, he definitely would have made it back to us in the 7th round, or at least probably would have made it back to us. So it can be a bad pick for that reason. But if we're just talking about the pure outlook in the points per game that we will have over the next 3 seasons compared to the wide receivers going behind him here, I actually like the idea of buying DeAndre Hopkins on the low, because we had people telling us on Patreon, we had Dakota coming out telling us on Patreon, who's a very sharp Dynasty player, that we need to be valuing DeAndre Hopkins where Julio Jones was last year. And I think that is a very bad call. I think that DeAndre Hopkins, a wide receiver that is currently 29 years old, that we have seen an incredibly large sample of 16 game season with 160 targets essentially every single year. I mean, to see that large of a sample and then 1 year that he deals with some injuries and has a fall off in his points per game because of that at 29 years old, when we've seen that wide receiver age, I mean, really is a completely different story than running back age. I actually am fine buying low on DeAndre Hopkins. Now, I'm always going to be the player that sells the running back 1 year too early and holds on to the wide receiver / quarterback 1 year too late. Now, let's go through, and we're probably going to continue to take wide receivers here. Honestly, I'm completely fine with this receiver value. We need to look at our rankings, figure out, yeah, we have Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy, and Rashad Bateman ranked all back-to-back in these rankings. We have Michael Thomas lower than the trio. I believe we have Claypool lower as well. Yeah, we have Claypool lower. Because we built a little bit older, we're actually going to take Amari Cooper. Now, if you're looking at our Dynasty rankings, we have Amari Cooper ranked as our wide receiver 26. And if you're going to be comparing this to Bateman, we have Rashad Bateman at wide receiver 28. We have Jerry Jeudy at wide receiver 27. With Amari Cooper, I know this is also a wide receiver that we've been talking about forever, because obviously he came out in the 2015 draft class. I mean, he came out in the same draft class as Todd Gurley. It looks like next year with Jackson Smith-Njigba and also and also Bijan Robinson, it's going to be very similar to that 2015 draft class where you had Amari Cooper and Todd Gurley, and those were the players that were by far and away in tier 1. You had an elite wide receiver prospect, an elite running back prospect. Obviously, Todd Gurley's already washed out, but a big thing with Amari Cooper is he was 20 years old at the time of the NFL draft. So despite Amari Cooper, I mean, being around in the NFL and being a discussion since his rookie season, seeming like forever, if you actually look at how old he is only 27, right in line with what we have with some of these other players like Calvin Ridley. Now, a big thing with Amari Cooper, if you're looking at his projection in 2022, if you're looking at the contract he has signed with Dallas, it's a fake deal. I mean, he has almost no guaranteed money on that contract. So maybe it's a little bit bloated. Maybe Amari Cooper is not a stable bet to be in Dallas. It's going to depend on what they're deciding to do with Michael Gallup this offseason, because if there is an outside chance, and I will be the first person to admit, I fell in love with Dynasty back in 2014. So those 2014 wide receivers and those 2015 wide receivers, I am extremely biased for. That's why we used to have the Sammy Watkins Buffalo Bills jersey. That's why we used to have the Amari Cooper, not Vegas Raiders, Oakland Raiders jersey, as well as not Mike Evans. We had the Odell Beckham Jr. Giants jersey, because that was the time that I really fell in love with Dynasty Fantasy Football. We used to have those up in the studio. So I'm biased with our guy Amari here. I think that our picks round 6, 7 can definitely be seen as bad selections. If you wanted to make the argument for us to take a quarterback in round 7, I think that would have been fine. And if you want to make the argument to take either Mike Evans, Brandon Ayuk, Michael Pittman, or Hollywood Brown in the 6th, that's great as well. And here I want to say I do not like this Juju Smith-Schuster selection. Y'all know with Juju, this was a wide receiver that I made a massive mistake on, quote unquote, buying low after his down season back in 2019. We were adamant that Juju was one of the best values in Dynasty. And because of that, I went out there and I way overpaid for him in a ton of different Dynasty leagues that I'm still feeling the consequences from every single year now. So trust me, Juju's one of my guys as well. But to go through and to take Juju Smith-Schuster at this point over Amari Cooper, over Jerry Jeudy, over Rashad Bateman, I don't think you can do that. I will actively say that's a very bad selection. But Derek coming out says 2021 gave us Leonard Fournette, James Conner, and you're saying I'm assuming you're meaning Renfro, 10th round or later, give or take. Who are your early 2022 target players who fall in the same area? A big thing that I want to discuss is running back value, and how I think that what we should be doing is waiting until right before the season to identify the running backs that we're going to take shots on in the later rounds. This is why if you're checking out what we are doing in this draft, this is why it's a little bit different in our best ball drafts, because in our best ball drafts, because you can't make trades, you're having to take those running backs early, but I'm avoiding like the plague the running backs that are going to be in the middle rounds here. I mean, guys like Leonard Fournette, guys like Kareem Hunt, guys like Tony Pollard. I really think that you should be taking wide receivers in this area instead. Like, I'm not going to be considering really to take James Conner, to take James Robinson in this range. And we probably need to go through and get ready with our next selection. Okay, so wide receiver, if we're looking through, I do not see a single name that actually there's one name that stands out to us. Now, if we're going to go over to the quarterback position, I mean, you got Cousins. There's a strong argument to be made to just take a QB here. Tight end, we have Dallas Goddard. I would take Dallas Goddard over the wide receiver I'd want. Would we want Dallas Goddard or a quarterback? Let's take our third QB, because we're getting the guys off the list now that have starting guaranteed jobs next year. So yeah, Dallas Goddard, I really like the call to go with him at the 809. I think we would have taken him if we decided not to take a quarterback. But in the Superflex format, I think especially in a 12-team league, if you play in a 10-team Superflex league, you don't necessarily need to go through and worry about getting that third quarterback, because just with the surplus of the position, I mean, it's going to be really easy to find someone like Ben Roethlisberger for just completely free. In a 12-team league, it's going to be a little bit more difficult, however, so we will take Kirk Cousins at the 808. But going back to what we were discussing in identifying running back breakouts, a big thing that I think we need to be doing going forward, when Amari St. Brown was the wide receiver we wanted, but a big thing I think we need to be doing when we're going and trying to identify those running back breakouts going into the season is we need to ask ourselves, is there uncertainty with the backfield? And also, does the offense to project to be in the top half or preferably an elite offense in the NFL? Because let's look at the two running backs that we just had mentioned, Leonard Fournette and James Conner. That's the exact mold of those players. We knew that there was some uncertainty in their backfields. You didn't know if it was going to be Ronald Jones. You didn't know if it was going to be Leonard Fournette. You didn't know if it was going to be James Conner. You didn't know if it was going to be Chase Edmonds. But what we did know is you knew that those were going to be elite offenses in the Arizona Cardinals and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So to go through and to take your cheap shots on those running backs in uncertain backfields right before the season, I think that's what we need to be doing. However, to know the running back depth charts at this point of the season, it's going to be a damn near impossible task. So that's why we're probably going to be avoiding going after those players. Now you get Carson Wentz going at the 902. Tannehill is a great value here. Honestly, maybe we should have passed on Cousins if we knew we could get Tannehill this late. If we were going to take a running back here, it'd probably be Ramondre Stevenson. Instead, do we just take a win now receiver in Robert Woods? Let me cue that up just in case we don't see anybody. Yeah, we're going to take Robert Woods here. I mean, with Robert Woods, I know it's a very boring selection. We're taking a couple players that are coming off significant injuries, but we're going to continue to hammer in wide receiver values in the middle rounds, and then we're going to take our shots on running backs later on because it's a very stable situation to take someone like Kirk Cousins. It's a very stable situation to take Robert Woods in this range. Whereas if you're looking at someone like James Conner's not under contract this next offseason. And with James Conner, I know he's a very talented running back, but was he an elite option in fantasy based on his talent this last year, or was it based on the situation in that Chase Edmonds went down and he was placed into a future down role in one of the most productive offenses in the NFL? It was probably the offense. It probably wasn't James Conner, the running back himself. So to go through and to take a wide receiver that we know what the role is going to be, we know the talent level with Robert Woods, I'm comfortable with it. I know that most other people would probably want us to go with Hunter Renfrow here. Let me pull up Patreon really quick and look at where I had Hunter Renfrow compared to Robert Woods in our rankings. Yes, we did actually have Hunter Renfrow as our wide receiver 31, and we had Robert Woods significantly further down the list. We had Hunter Renfrow as the best value available. Probably should have gone with him. The reason that I think we decided to pass in the moment is with Hunter Renfrow, there are some concerns in what you're going to have this next season. And that once you get Darren Waller back in this offense, I mean, Hunter Renfrow wasn't seeing 10 plus targets a game until Darren Waller went down. The second that happened, the switch completely flipped. It was a night and day difference with the volume you had from Hunter Renfrow. And also, this is a clear team that is probably going to go through and be prioritizing bringing in a top wide receiver in the NFL draft class in 2022. Very similar to what we were discussing with James Conner. I think that with Hunter Renfrow, he was more so a product of this situation that you had rather than the actual talent that you had this past year. Now, interesting to see that you get Tannehill going at the 906. I think if we're going back and looking at it's Emrod's team, maybe to take Tyler Lockett here didn't make as much sense to just getting one of these stable quarterbacks like Kirk Cousins or Ryan Tannehill that you knew you could start at quarterback too. I really like that Adam Thielen value here as well. I know he's a little bit older, but as we discussed, I'm willing to buy in on the older wide receiver and pass on the older running back. Yeah, so we're probably not going to go QB. We already have 3. Okay, Devin Singletar at the 10:07. I like the Singletary pick. Okay, so now we're going to be up on the clock. Do we go LaVisca? It's LaVisca, Chenault, or at tight end. Tight end, I feel comfortable with what we can get later on. I mean, every team behind us has a tight end. If you're looking at the starting lineup requirements here, I mean, technically we can start up to 6 wide receivers. We're going to be starting a quarterback instead. So we're only going to be starting 5 wide receivers on a week-to-week basis. So, I mean, if we're taking LaVisca Chenault, he's going to be in that starting lineup more weeks than not. Where did we have LaVisca in our rankings? We have LaVisca back-to-back with Kenny Golladay. Yeah, this is about the range where I think we should be going Visca. I am very much concerned with LaVisca Chenault because if you're looking, this is going to be his 3rd head coach in his 3-year NFL career. I mean, if you're including an interim head coach, it's going to be his 4th head coach in his 3-year NFL career. That's not too appealing of a situation. And honestly, going back to this, maybe we should have gone with Dallas Goddard here in the 8th round. Because if we decided to pass on Kirk Cousins, we could have had the combination of, say, Dallas Goddard and Daniel Jones versus Kirk Cousins and LaVisca Chenault. Let me know what y'all think in that scenario. Chris Carson go at the 1103 here. I don't like it. Actually, this is an auto draft team. This is an auto draft team. I would pause the draft and fix it, but I think we are fine to keep rolling. People know that you shouldn't be taking Chris Carson. The 1103, who are we going to be taking here? I think we can look to grab a tight end. Ronald Jones not under contract this next season. We're probably not going to be considering any running backs here, if we're being honest. We're going to go over the tight end position. I believe we have Irv Smith Jr. ranked higher than Rob Gronkowski in our Dynasty rankings. Let me go over to Patreon and confirm that. We have Gronk at tight end 12. We have Irv Smith Jr. at tight end 13. Okay, so they are back-to-back in our rankings. We actually have Hunter Henry at tight end 14 as well. So all 3 of these tight ends, we have them ahead of Zach Ertz And we have Cole Kmet actually one spot ahead of Gronk as well. But the reason we're going with Gronk instead of those younger tight ends is if you just look at the build of this roster right now, I mean, we do not have many young assets to build around for the future. This is definitely going to be a win now team for 2022. We have our anchor running back here. We're going to be taking shots on running back once we get closer to the season. We have our elite level tight end. One big thing is Gronk is like 6 months older than Travis Kelce. That's the gap between the two. We have our 2 stud quarterbacks with a 3rd rotational in case of an injury, in case Deshaun Watson doesn't play. And then we have our stable wide receivers that I would pretty much bet is better than any core wide receivers in the, I mean, not in the NFL, than in this league, outside of maybe it's Imrod. Okay. So you have some more tight ends going off the board. Don't really care about that once we get Gronk. Tribute Trout says, you have a championship week in week 18? Question mark? No. If you're playing a fantasy football championship in week 18, you're doing it wrong. You were definitely doing it wrong. Okay. Jan says, why is Gibson going later running back wise than in 2022 early fantasy football drafts? I agree with you, my friend. I think Antonio Gibson was a pretty damn good value here at the 407. Like, I mean, if we're looking at my dynasty rankings, in looking at where I have Antonio Gibson compared to where he went in this draft, I have Antonio Gibson ranked actually right about where he went. Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Yeah, I have Antonio Gibson ranked right here. So I guess maybe I can't say that he was that great of a value. Let me see. These dynasty rankings, I probably have to move Antonio Gibson up. I honestly kind of feel pressured, I'm not going to lie, to have guys like Derrick Henry ranked ahead of Antonio Gibson, where I really don't want that to be the case. I don't want to have Derrick Henry ranked there. Okay, so Chuba Hubbard at the 1201. Apologize. Let me pivot back to all for the ADP, even though this ADP is garbage. You shouldn't be looking at it really much to begin with. Okay, so Jimmy Garoppolo at the 1202. So it's Imrod just taking some shots on quarterbacks that can be starting. It's Imrod. Real quick, what I definitely want to say is once you wait this long on QB, I think you could potentially even wait longer. I know that's crazy to say, but if you're looking across this draft so far, I mean, I guess the Crooks guy right next to you, he only had 1 quarterback. But outside of that, every team has 2. The majority of teams have 3 QBs. So maybe I'm overthinking it a little bit. Maybe you could have just tested it out in a dynasty startup draft to see if instead you would have gone with a combination of, say, Chuba Hubbard and Tyler Boyd. Not saying that those were the best values on the board, but if you would have seen the same tier of quarterbacks making it back to you, guys like Jameis Winston. Okay, so let's go through and pull some stuff up here. I guess we're actually going to be double tapping the tight end position. If you're looking at Cole Kmet, I actually have Cole Kmet ranked ahead of some of these tight ends right here. I mean, he was an extremely young option in the 2020 draft class. He had a decent rookie season, a decent sophomore year. I mean, y'all know that you shouldn't expect production early on from your tight end, his NFL career. That's why we weren't drafting Kyle Pitts this last offseason. That's why instead we are taking Najee Harris. That's why instead we are taking Trey Lance, because historically speaking, I mean, those positions are significantly better to bet on for them to exponentially rise in dynasty value their rookie season, as well as give you immediate production. Obviously, it doesn't happen with Trey Lance. It is what it is. But now, I mean, I think you should be able to expect Cole Kmet to have a pretty significant step forward going into year 3. Now, Davis Mills goes at the 1209. I do not think I have Davis Mills ranked in our top 30 quarterbacks in our dynasty rankings. Maybe that's a mistake by myself. Corey Davis, great value here at the 1211. If you're looking at our dynasty rankings, I actually had him ranked right here with Laviska Shenault 3 rounds earlier. That Laviska Shenault pick was very, very bad. Okay, so let's pivot back over to the chat. And Brock says, oh, we have to start 5 wide receivers. No, you don't have to start 5 wide receivers, as I was mentioning. Oh, okay, actually, no, I apologize. You can start up to 5 wide receivers, but in reality, you're probably only going to be starting 4 wide receivers, given the fact that you have the super flex spot. The starting lineup requirements are always going to be listed right here when you hop in a draft. Danny says, who are you planning for your second running back? That's something that's very different between a best ball draft at this point and also just a dynasty fantasy football draft. I do not care about our roster construction. I could care less about our team needs, because I don't know if you know this, We have 7 months to go through and trade for a running back. We can wait until NFL free agency, wait until the NFL draft, figure out what's going on with the entire running back landscape, a position that's dominated by situation rather than talent. So I think that it's a better idea to just continue to hammer in on value rather than focusing in on team need when we're drafting in January. Okay, so let's go through, figure this out. Okay, we're panicking. We're full-blown panic mode. We're gonna take Devontae Parker just because I have no idea what else to do. We had 10 seconds left. We're gonna take Parker. We're just gonna go with the talented veteran wide receiver. Yeah. Please, please, please. When you're drafting at this point, do not think that you should be going through and looking at your team from a balanced perspective. If you think the best value is to go through and take a wide receiver in the first 10 rounds, and you are a confident Dynasty fantasy football player, and you have played in a multitude of Dynasty fantasy football leagues for a very long time, you can go through and do whatever the hell you need to. But if you are a new Dynasty fantasy football player and you're not comfortable with the trade market, and in that instance, I probably would recommend to come with a little bit more of a balanced approach. But if you're comfortable with how you can work the trade market, I mean, I'm not taking guys like Melvin Gordon here. I mean, definitely, I would rather take someone like Jordan Love, where I'd feel comfortable that you can go through and easily see a spike in his value at some point this offseason. Okay, so Matt Hill says, I'm not an Ayuk guy at all. I'm completely out on him. I think he gets phased out of the offense with Trey Lance at quarterback. Not enough passing volume to feed Kittle, Debo, and Ayuk. I completely agree with you. I think that with Trey Lance coming in, y'all know nobody likes Trey Lance as much as I did. I literally won $1,000 on a Trey Lance bet yesterday. And at the same time, I mean, we went through and, I mean, I don't know if y'all saw this. I tweeted it out yesterday, but it was pretty significant news. Like, I can't believe I went this long without knowing this, but I completed a 23andMe yesterday, and I actually found out that Trey Lance was my real father, which is like disturbing to say the least that I'm not finding that out until 23 years old. I don't know how I'm going to approach my family about it, but yeah, I love me some Trey Lance. However, just like how we really liked taking Jalen Hurts at the beginning of the 3rd round, the end of the 2nd round in 2020 Dynasty rookie drafts. I mean, we were drafting him there because his rushing upside. We were saying he doesn't have to be a great NFL passer to be able to come out and be a quarterback 1 in fantasy, which has been proven correct. Very similar to Trey Lance. Now, I like Trey Lance a lot more than Jalen Hurts based on the situation that he'll be in, as well as the fact that he has the job security based on the team investment placed into him by the 49ers. But I'm not coming out here and saying Trey Lance is going to be top 10 in the NFL in passing yards. I think that's far from the case. I think it's going to be the exact opposite. I think that the 49ers are most likely going to be bottom 10 in the NFL with passing yards with Trey Lance under center. Now, it doesn't really matter because with Trey Lance, he's going to be that elite rushing quarterback, so he's going to be elite in fantasy drafts because fantasy is fantasy. It's fake. It's a little bit of a different scenario when we're going through and valuing Brandon Ayuk as well as Deebo Samuel. Okay, so we got Sam Darnold at the 1403. Jameis Winston at the 1404. Okay, so yeah, this is what I was talking about. It's Imrod. I mean, if you were to go through and if you were to pass on these quarterbacks here, I mean, you would have possibly seen people take Taysom Hill and Jimmy Garoppolo instead, and you possibly would have gotten, say, Jordan Love and Jameis Winston falling back to you instead of the combination of Darrell Williams and Antonio Brown. Not saying that's the correct thing to do. I know you're in pretty much every single Dynasty draft with us, including last season. I know that you know exactly what you're doing in Dynasty. Just saying it's something intriguing to think about. Okay, let's go through. I'd imagine Julio Jones isn't going to play. We're probably going to go through and take the most disappointing rookie from this past draft class in Terrace Marshall. This is an option that literally could not even get on the field. I think if we're looking at best running back available, it's actually going to be Jamal Williams here, with Jamal Williams having the guaranteed money on his contract, or Kenyon Drake as well. If we're looking at quarterback, yeah, I think that we actually are in a range where we can go through and we can take Terrace Marshall. Obviously, just completely flamed out, could not even get on the field. And I know a lot of people are going to be down there in the comment section mad at us going, Oh my God, Mason, you did not take a second running back here. You idiot. There's no way you win this league. Yeah. I'm not submitting a starting lineup. If this league was a real league, I'm not submitting a starting lineup for 7 months. I'm going to treat this how I would a regular Dynasty Fantasy Football startup at this point. You know, we'll be getting a decent amount of those going over there on Patreon. I mean, throughout the entire offseason. But here's the draft board for anybody wanting to take a screenshot, pause it really quick. Edwin here, I believe, started auto-drafting around this James Conner selection in the 9th round. So, of course, I apologize for that. But thank you so much for coming out to the live stream. Thank y'all for hopping in the draft. And, of course, if you want to get in our Dynasty drafts, you want to get our Dynasty rankings, you can find that all on Patreon in the description of this live stream in the comment section as well. Please, if you have not done so already, drop a like. Help us we're about to be at 100 likes on this live stream. Subscribe to the channel at the same time. If, for whatever reason, you have not done so already, I think that should be it. Thank you all so much, and hope you have a great day.